Alright guys, so today we're going to be looking at an updated build for Lepic. Now Lepic has received a very slight buff here with the recent balance patch, and that has actually made him a little bit viable in everything, including the Axion Plains. Now while there are a couple different builds you can use for Lepic, I'm going to show you the one that I personally prefer when it comes to mobbing with him. Now while there are a couple different builds you can currently use for Lepic, I am going to show you my favorite build for him right now. And having said all of that guys, let's go ahead and hop into the video. Alright, so as always, we're going to go ahead and start out the weapons, and the weapon we're going to be using on this build is going to be the Secret Garden. Now, generally, I tell you that this weapon is a stat stick, and while that holds true and it is a stat stick in this situation, we are actually going to build into it just a little bit, and I'll explain why later on in the build. So for the cores and rolls on this, we are going to treat it like a stat stick, but like a stat stick that can actually do a little bit of damage. So because of that, we are going to go ahead and slap on the 3 sprint speed cores, and we are going to go ahead and put on 1 firearm critical hit damage. For the purple core down bottom, it literally doesn't matter what you put in it, you can leave it blank if you want. When it comes to the roll down bottom, I would go ahead and put firearm attack on it, firearm critical hit rate, and damage. Now on mine, I do actually have bonus firearm attack versus Order of Truth. You can completely get rid of this if you want to and put something on here like weak point damage. For the mods on this weapon, we're actually going to put a little bit of a build on here because we will be doing some damage with it, even if it is just bonus damage. This is one of the few times you're actually going to see a build that I use on my Secret Garden. So the build I have on it right now really builds into the weapon strength, which is critical hit damage. Outside of that, we do build a little bit of weak point and a little bit of the weapons based damage, and we do put a little bit of fire rate up on here as well. And then we add just a little bit of mag just to make the gun feel that much better when we go to use it. So when it comes to the reactor on this build, we're going to go ahead and use a tech reactor, and we're going to put the optimized condition to be attack rifle because we are running the Secret Garden. So when it comes to the roll down bottom, we're going to go ahead and go with skill critical hit damage and skill cooldown. We need that critical hit damage because I have tried this build both as a critical hit and a non-critical hit build, and the critical hit build seems to do better. So that's why we're putting that on here. And then the cooldown is going to ensure that we can spam both our traction grenade and our regular grenades as much as possible, as that is what this entire build synergizes around. Now for the components on this, we're going to go ahead and use the Slayer set because the Slayer set actually has a very nice synergy with Lepic. When you defeat enemies that are towed, you get a little bit of MP back, and that is going to make it much easier for us to really utilize his build and not have to build too much into MP and MP recovery into his mods. So we do really like that effect on this component set. The other thing it does is it does give him a little bit of skill power, which is just going to increase his damage. Now, I will say that the old sets do not really do as well for your HP and your defense. So make sure you are putting the exact rolls and cores you see on these components on your build. If not, your Lepic is going to be very squishy out in the field and is going to have next to no HP. So when it comes to the inversion reinforcement, this is what we're going to be looking at, and one that I do like here is going to be focus boost. Now, while we're doing everything we can to get a bunch of our MP back, it is nice to reduce the cost of our grenades and of our traction grenade by just a little bit. And this is going to let us do that, which is going to make it not feel that bad if for whatever reason we aren't getting a lot of kills. Say we're dealing with big bosses or end of the match bosses where we're not actually killing them. This is going to help make sure that we can get more grenades off and more traction grenades off. Selective neurostimulation is another one that really helps to make this build feel well when it comes to taking on those big chunky enemies. This is going to give us a little bit of MP back, which is going to help in those prolonged fights where we're not just spam killing a bunch of enemies. And last but not least, we're going to go ahead and use deploy resonance device, and we're using this for just a little bit more duration, which is going to help our traction grenades stay in the air a little bit longer, which is going to make it easier for us to get all of our grenades on target and to take out large clusters of enemies all at once. So for the Arche tuning tree, this is what we like. We do get a bunch of critical hit rate and damage out of this, and we do actually need that cooldown node, so that really kind of limits us to the upper right hand corner of the Arche tuning tree. Outside of that, we're going to get a little bit of additional skill power and a little bit of additional range, and we're going to finish it off with 1 mutated cell. Now the mutated cell I picked here is Arche reload, and I do like this because it gives us a ton of skill critical hit rate whenever we reload, and we're going to be reloading a lot with this build, so we will be able to get quite a bit of uptime on this. Now the only downside of that mod is it does have an exceedingly long cooldown time, so if it doesn't work for you and it doesn't work for your playstyle and you want to go with something else, I would suggest going with something like Fire Cohesion up there. That's going to give you a ton of additional damage while you're doing the mobbing portion of this build and you're stacking up kills. Try them both out and see which works best for you, and remember that you can actually cut these cells out. So if you decide to switch between your cells, don't just overwrite them. Make sure you use the liquid scissors to cut the cell out, that way you have it in case you want to switch back to the other cell. Now for the fellow, I would go ahead and use the Husky. It's not really doing that much right now, especially because the MP cycle seems to be very, very long when it comes time to give you additional MP. But even with it being a long cycle, I would still put this dog on just for those little boosts of MP throughout your typical fight. And it's going to do more for you than any of the other dogs right now in the game. Alright guys, so when it comes to the mods on the build, this is actually what we're going to be looking at. We are going to go ahead and run Explosive Stack as our Transcendent mod. Outside of that, we're going to build really heavily into crit rate and damage, and as you guys know, a crit build typically takes up 6 mods just to have a crit build. Outside of that, we've got 2 cooldown mods on here, which takes us to a total of 8 mods. That only really leaves us room for 2 additional mods, and we're going to use 1 for skill expansion and we're going to use 1 for dangerous ambush. We're using skill expansion to make sure that our traction grenade gets as big of a radius as we can get, given that we're only really using 2 mods. And then the last we're going to use is dangerous ambush, because as the enemies are towed, we're going to get a bunch of additional damage while they're in the air. For the trigger mod, I want to talk about 2 specific mods. One of them is going to be Blasting Zone, and the other one is going to be Death by 1,000 Cuts. Now, in the gameplay footage you're going to see later on, I was using Death by 1,000 Cuts. But the more I use it, the more I realize that it is not always the most efficient in most content. It does look really, really good when you're using it in something like the testing arena, where you can stand there, keep things 100% under traction, and spam your grenades. The other really good thing about Death by 1,000 Cuts on paper is its cooldown. It has a 0.5 second cooldown, which means you're going to be getting this all the time. But you're only going to be getting it all the time once you build your stacks up. And in order to build your stacks up, you need to spam a ton of grenades. So while you can, in theory, get this off every 0.5 seconds, in practice, that's not going to be happening as much in the open world. So because of that, I'm actually going to go ahead and use Blasting Zone. Now, this has a 4-second cooldown and a 4-second duration. So as long as you're stacking your traction grenades in the same spot, you can keep 100% uptime on this skill. The other reason I like this is because you will be moving around a lot in all types of content, and it will only typically take you 1 set of grenades to kill an entire pack. So to get Death by 1,000 Cuts, you're going to need to kill 4 groups of enemies in order to ever even get a proc. And then most of the time, the enemies are going to die from your grenade, and they're not really going to be dying because of your Death by 1,000 Cuts. So this, in practice, gives me a lot more damage and a lot more utility in general mobbing. Personally, what I'll say here is try both of them, as they do not cost you anything to switch in and out. I think that during the mobbing portion, you'll get more out of something like Blasting Zone. But when it comes to the final bosses, if you really spam them with your grenades, you might actually get a little bit more out of Death by 1,000 Cuts. So just try them and find out which one works better with your playstyle. The last thing I want to talk about on this build is going to be where to put a little bit of extra HP if you feel like you need the extra HP. Go ahead and take Dangerous Ambush off and put an HP mod there. That is where I would suggest you put it if you decide that this build does not have enough survivability for you. So now we're going to talk about how to play this build, and before I do that, I want to remind you guys, the First Descendant is a game that changes quite frequently. Their developers love to make changes, and because of that, there are some times where we might have to make a very small tweak to our build during the middle of the season. The reason I bring that up is make sure in all of my videos you check for a pinned comment. I use these pinned comments to help you guys understand if there is a change to the build, or if we need to work on something, or if there's an updated version of the build. So always check for a pinned comment down below. All right, so when it comes to playing this build, there's one skill you need to understand, and that is going to be your overclock. The main thing you need to know about this skill is it is going to increase your skill critical hit damage, and it is going to increase the fire rate on your weapon. Now, the fire rate thing is not permanent. This is modified by the amount of stacks that you have on your overclock. And as you shoot your weapon, those stacks go down. The reason that skill is important is because we're going to be cycling through our 3s and our 1s on this build. Our 3 is going to group enemies up, and our 1 is going to do all of the damage. So we're just going to go ahead and throw out a 3. As it groups up our enemies, we're going to go ahead and throw some grenades in there. Now we do have 3 grenades and they do refill quite quickly. However, they do not refill as fast as our traction grenades do. And that is where the overclock comes in. So if you look down at our number 1 skill, there is a 9 there. If we use 9 bullets, we will get a grenade back. And this is outside of the grenade's actual cooldown. So by firing our weapon, we can refill our grenade stacks. And overclock is going to allow us to do this even faster, because by proccing overclock, we're going to be able to shoot our gun that much quicker. So for our gameplay loop, we're going to throw out a traction grenade, we're going to group up all the enemies, we're going to throw some regular grenades in there, and then between throwing regular grenades, we're going to go ahead and fire our secret garden at that group of enemies. That way we get our grenades back. And it is very much a rinse and repeat for the entire time you play this character. Doesn't matter if it's a large single target, an end of the map boss, or just regular mobs. Throw out a traction grenade, throw out some regular grenades, shoot your gun, rinse and repeat. This build does an insane amount of damage, and as you'll see in the gameplay footage, it is very easy to take out most things relatively quickly. Alright guys, and that's it. That is everything you need to know about how to play Lepic and the build that we enjoy in the current sandbox. Again, if you did not watch through my how to play section, make sure you check for pinned comments in this video and all of my videos moving forward. The First Descendant team likes to change a lot of things up mid-season, and it is very easy to need just a micro tweak to a build to make it be viable again, or there is a chance that YouTube is not showing you my most recent video, so you might want to check the pinned comment just to make sure you did watch the most recent build that we have available. But having said that, hopefully you guys enjoyed the content. If you did, consider liking and subscribing for more First Descendant content, as well as other game coverage in the future. We do plan on covering other games, and we would love to have you watch all of our content. I also do stream 5 days a week, both here on YouTube and over on Twitch, and if you want to get to know me and the community a little bit better, consider coming over and watching one of those live streams. We would absolutely love to have you around and get to know you and introduce you to the rest of the community. But having said all that, guys, thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.